Captain Elena Rodriguez. 27 years old, fifth-generation military, and the best pilot in the squadron, though command would never officially admit it. On the screen behind her, satellite imagery showed a convoy of enemy vehicles stretching for nearly 3 miles through a mountain pass. The briefing room was dead silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional shuffle of boots on worn linoleum. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, mobile anti-aircraft systems, supply trucks, a mechanized column that represented months of enemy planning and positioning. Intelligence estimated 40 to 50 vehicles, maybe more, moving with the kind of coordination that suggested professional military training rather than irregular forces. Colonel Marcus Hayden stood at the front of the room, his weathered face carved into lines by 3 decades of military service and too many deployments to count. He'd seen optimistic mission plans before, watched them dissolve into chaos the moment they made contact with reality. This one felt different. This one felt impossible. "Listen up," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. 7th Armored attempted an interdiction yesterday at 1600 hours. They had air support, artillery, the works. Result: 3 Abrams damaged, 2 Bradleys destroyed, 8 casualties. The enemy column didn't even slow down. He clicked through to the next slide, showing the aftermath of that engagement. Burning vehicles, cratered roads, the unmistakable signs of a battle that had gone badly wrong. 3rd Aviation tried at 2100 hours with Apache gunships, best attack helicopter pilots in the theater. Another click. More wreckage, this time American helicopters scattered across rocky terrain. 2 birds down, 4 crew KIA, 1 captured. The enemy has mobile SAM systems we didn't know about, integrated radar we can't jam, and they're moving through terrain that makes conventional ground assault suicide. Elena watched the images without expression, her mind already working through tactical problems and possible solutions. She'd studied this target for 6 hours straight, memorizing every curve in the road, every potential firing position, every piece of terrain that could provide cover or concealment. Air Force tried high-altitude bombing at 0200 hours, Hayden continued. Smart bombs, JDAMS, the full strike package, hit 3 vehicles out of 47. The convoy dispersed, went into the canyons, and by the time our planes came back around, they'd already repositioned. He paused, letting the weight of those failures sink in. Command has decided that this convoy cannot be allowed to reach its destination. Intelligence indicates they're carrying advanced weapon systems, probably Russian-made, definitely stuff we don't want in enemy hands. If they get through this pass and link up with main enemy forces in the valley beyond, we'll be dealing with a significantly enhanced threat capability for the next 6 months. Another slide. This one showed a single F-35 Lightning II on the tarmac, sleek and deadly in the pre-dawn darkness. Which brings us to Plan D. Hayden's eyes found Elena in the crowd of pilots. Captain Rodriguez, front and center. Elena moved forward with the same economy of motion she brought to everything, positioning herself beside the colonel. Around the room, other pilots shifted uncomfortably. They knew what was coming, and none of them liked it. Hayden gestured to the F-35 on the screen. Single aircraft, low-altitude approach, terrain masking to avoid radar detection. Captain Rodriguez will fly through the canyon system, pop up at the last possible moment, and engage targets with her full weapons load. 20 minutes in the target area, maximum. Then, egress before the enemy can effectively respond. "Sir, that's," started Major Peterson, one of the senior pilots. "Suicide?" Hayden finished for him. "Yeah, that's what Air Force Command said too. That's what the Army said. That's what everyone above my pay grade has been saying for the past 8 hours. He turned to face the room fully. "Command says no one can beat this enemy. The convoy is too well defended, too mobile, too smart. Every conventional approach has failed." He let that hang in the air for a moment. But Captain Rodriguez isn't conventional. On cue, the screen changed to show Elena's service record, top of her class at flight school, weapon systems officer scores that broke records, combat missions flown, 47. Combat missions where she'd expended ordnance, 47. Hit rate, 94%. 0 friendly fire incidents, 0 aircraft losses under her command. She's logged more stick time in the F-35 than any pilot in theater, Hayden continued. She knows that aircraft better than the engineers who built it, and she's got something that all our previous attempts lacked. She doesn't give a damn what command thinks is impossible. Elena remained at attention, face impassive, but something flickered in her dark eyes. Recognition, maybe, or anticipation. This was what she'd been training for. This was why she'd pushed herself harder than anyone else, flown more missions, studied more tactics, spent more hours in the simulator running scenarios that other pilots considered too dangerous to be worth practicing. Command has approved this mission under extreme circumstances protocol, Hayden said. That means Captain Rodriguez has full autonomy once she's wheels up. No second guessing from brass, no mission abort unless she calls it. She'll have complete tactical control. He pulled up the tactical map, showing the flight path through the canyon system. Red icons marked known enemy positions, the route threaded between them like a needle through fabric, requiring precision, flying at speeds that left zero margin for error. The convoy will enter the kill zone at approximately 0630 hours, Hayden continued. Weather is clear, visibility unlimited. Enemy anti-air is concentrated at the entrance and exit of the pass, leaving a narrow window in the middle where our bird can operate. Captain Rodriguez will approach from the south, using the canyon walls to mask her radar signature, then engage from an altitude where their mobile SAMs can't track effectively. Major Peterson raised his hand. Sir, what's the projected success rate? Hayden's expression didn't change. Air Force combat analysis puts it at 11%. A ripple of discomfort moved through the assembled pilots. 11% meant this was a one-way trip. 11% meant command was throwing a pilot and $100 million aircraft at a problem they couldn't solve any other way, hoping for a miracle. And what does Captain Rodriguez put it at? Peterson asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer wouldn't be comforting. Elena spoke for the first time, her voice calm and absolutely certain. 100%, sir. I'll destroy every vehicle in that convoy. The room went quiet again, but this time the silence had a different quality. Not the heavy uncertainty from before, but something sharper. Some pilots looked at her like she was crazy, others like she was the most dangerous person in the room. Hayden nodded slowly. Dismissed. Captain Rodriguez, meet me on the tarmac in 15 minutes. We've got some people who want to say their piece before you fly. The pre-dawn air was cool and sharp with the smell of jet fuel and desert dust. Elena walked across the tarmac toward her F-35, her flight helmet under one arm, already running through pre-flight checks in her head. The aircraft sat on the hardstand like a predator waiting to hunt, angular, aggressive, covered in the low observable coatings that made it nearly invisible to enemy radar. Ground crew swarmed over it, performing final weapons checks and systems tests. Under the wings and in the internal bays, the aircraft carried its full combat load. AEM-12-0 AMRAAMs for air-to-air defense, AIM-9X Sidewinders for close-range threats, and most importantly, GBU-39 small-diameter bombs and AGM-154 joint standoff weapons for ground attack. 20,000 pounds of precision-guided destruction, all of it carefully selected for this specific mission. Captain Rodriguez. She turned to find Colonel Hayden approaching with 4 other people. She recognized them immediately. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, her weapons systems officer during training, Captain Marcus Webb, one of the squadron's most experienced pilots, First Lieutenant James Mitchell, fresh from flight school but showing real promise, and Master Sergeant David Torres, the crew chief who'd been maintaining her aircraft for the past 8 months. They formed a loose semicircle in front of the F-35, the aircraft looming behind them like a silent witness to whatever was about to be said. Hayden spoke first, his voice lower now, less command briefing and more genuine conversation. Command says no one can beat this enemy, Elena. They've tried everything conventional, everything by the book. All of it failed. He paused, choosing his words carefully. but I've watched you fly. I've seen you do things with that aircraft that shouldn't be physically possible. I've watched you thread a needle through terrain that would make other pilots soil their flight suits. He glanced at the F-35 behind them. If anyone can do this, it's you. But I need you to understand what you're up against. Lieutenant Chen stepped forward. She'd been Elena's WSO during the training program, had sat behind her through hundreds of hours of simulated combat. The enemy's integrated air defense is no joke, Captain. They've got SA-15 Gauntlet systems, probably SA-22 Greyhound too. Those are fourth-generation SAMS with terminal phase maneuvering. If they get a lock on you, they won't, Elena said simply. Captain Webb shook his head. You don't know that. None of us know that. This mission profile requires you to fly through canyons barely wider than your wingspan, at speeds where a single mistake means you're a crater on the canyon wall. And that's before you even reach the target. I've flown worse. No, you haven't. Webb's voice carried the weight of experience. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've flown combat missions in 3 different theaters. What you're about to attempt is beyond anything I would consider survivable. The variables are too numerous, the risk too high. Elena met his gaze steadily. Then it's a good thing I'm flying it, and not you. It wasn't said with arrogance, just fact. Webb had the grace to acknowledge it with a slight nod. Lieutenant Mitchell spoke up, his youth evident in the slight nervousness in his voice. Ma'am, what if something goes wrong? What if the weapons don't release, or the targeting system glitches, or... Then I adapt, that's what we do. Elena turned to face all of them. Look, I appreciate the concern, really. But I've been preparing for this my entire career. Every training flight, every simulation, every mission I've flown has been leading to this moment. Master Sergeant Torres finally spoke, his gruff voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been keeping pilots alive through mechanical expertise for 20 years. Aircraft is in perfect condition, Captain. Every system checked and double-checked. But even perfect machines can fail when pushed to their limits, and this mission is going to push that bird to limits the engineers never intended. I know, Sergeant. That's why I trust you to have prepared it properly. Hayden pulled out a tablet and brought up a satellite feed. Live imagery from 30 minutes ago. The convoy is moving faster than projected. They'll be in the target zone 10 minutes earlier than expected, which means your window is narrower. You'll have less time to acquire targets, less time to engage, less time to egress before their QRF responds. Elena studied the imagery, her mind already recalculating flight times and weapons employment sequences. Understood. I'll adjust. Command is watching this in real time, Hayden continued. Joint Chiefs, probably NSC staff, definitely some people whose names we'll never know. This isn't just about stopping one convoy. This is about proving we can still respond effectively when conventional methods fail. He looked at her directly. You're not just flying a mission, Captain. You're proving a concept. Solo aircraft, autonomous operation, maximum aggression. If you succeed, it changes how we think about air power. If you fail, I won't fail. The certainty in her voice wasn't bravado. It was something deeper, something that came from thousands of hours of training and an almost instinctive understanding of how aircraft, weapons, and physics interacted in the chaos of combat. Chen stepped closer, lowering her voice. Elena, there's something else. The enemy knows we're coming. Maybe not specifically you, but they know we haven't given up on stopping them. They'll have spotters, early warning systems, probably fighters on standby. The moment you pop up to engage, they'll throw everything they have at you. Good. That means they'll be focused on me instead of moving toward their objective. Webb shook his head in something between admiration and disbelief. You're actually looking forward to this. Elena allowed herself a small smile. I didn't join the Air Force to fly cargo planes, sir. This is what I do. This is what I'm good at. She turned toward the F-35, but Hayden's voice stopped her. One more thing. The convoy is carrying something command won't specify. Something important enough that they're willing to risk you in a fifth-generation fighter to stop it. Whatever it is, it's bad enough that failure isn't an option. Then it's fortunate I don't plan to fail. Torres stepped forward with her flight helmet, freshly prepped with communication systems checked and helmet-mounted display calibrated. Bring my bird back in one piece, Captain. I've put too much work into her to see her scattered across a mountainside. Elena took the helmet, the weight familiar and reassuring. I'll do my best, Sergeant. Your best is better than anyone else's perfect, Torres said gruffly. Now get up there and show those bastards why American pilots are the best in the world. The group dispersed slowly, each person heading back to their duties, leaving Elena alone with the aircraft. She completed her walk-around inspection with practiced efficiency, checking control surfaces, weapons loads, access panels. Everything was perfect, just as Torres had promised. The crew chief appeared at her elbow as she prepared to mount the ladder. Captain, one thing. The bird's been loaded with something extra. Special authorization from command. External fuel tanks on stations 3 and 7, plus a modified weapons load in the internal bay. Elena frowned slightly. Modified how? More SDBS, fewer JASSMS. Command wants maximum target engagement capability. They're expecting you to hit a lot of targets in a very short time. She processed this. Small diameter. Bombs were excellent for precision strikes against individual vehicles, but they had limited blast radius. Command was betting she could achieve pinpoint accuracy against multiple moving targets in a high-threat environment. No pressure. Understood. Thanks, Sergeant. She climbed the ladder and settled into the cockpit, the familiar embrace of the ejection seat and the complex array of displays and controls surrounding her. This was her element, her domain. In this cockpit, she wasn't just a pilot, she was an extension of the aircraft itself, human intuition merged with machine precision. The startup sequence was second nature, systems coming online one by one, displays flickering to life, the steady hum of power flowing through the aircraft's systems. She ran through the checklist with automatic precision while her mind was already 3 steps ahead, visualizing the flight path, planning weapons employment sequences, calculating fuel consumption rates. Tower, Viper 1-1, ready for taxi. Viper 1-1 Tower, you are cleared to taxi runway 27, winds light and variable. Godspeed, Captain. The F-35 rolled forward, its single engine producing 50,000 pounds of thrust, more than enough to push the aircraft to supersonic speeds. Elena taxied to the runway threshold, going through final checks while the eastern horizon began to lighten with the approaching dawn. Tower, Viper 1-1, ready for takeoff. Viper 1-1, you are cleared for takeoff. Good hunting. Elena advanced the throttle, feeling the familiar surge of power as the F-35 accelerated down the runway. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing into the pre-dawn sky, and she banked south toward the mountains where an enemy convoy was about to learn what happened when command said something was impossible. Because Elena Rodriguez didn't believe in impossible. She believed in physics, training, and the absolute certainty that she was about to destroy 44 enemy vehicles in 18 minutes. Time to prove it. The approach. The F-35 sliced through the air at 400 knots, hugging the terrain so closely that Elena could see individual rocks on the canyon walls flashing past her wingtips. The aircraft's terrain-following radar painted a 3-dimensional map ahead of her, but she was flying primarily on instinct and visual reference, her eyes constantly scanning from instruments to terrain and back again. The mountains of the disputed territory rose around her like the teeth of some ancient beast, jagged peaks still dusted with snow despite the desert heat at lower elevations. The canyon system she was threading through had been carved over millennia by rivers that no longer existed, leaving behind a maze of twisting corridors barely wide enough for her aircraft. Viper 1-1, command. 30 minutes to target zone. Convoys proceeding on schedule. No change in threat assessment. Copy, command. Proceeding as planned. The voice on the radio belonged to someone sitting in an air-conditioned command center 500 miles away, watching her progress on radar screens and satellite feeds. They could see the big picture, but they couldn't feel what she was feeling, the subtle vibrations through the stick that told her exactly how the aircraft was responding to the thin mountain air, the slight pressure changes that indicated wind currents funneling through the canyons, the instinctive awareness of where her wings were relative to the rock walls on either side. This was the difference between good pilots and great ones. Good pilots flew by instruments and procedures. Great pilots flew by feel, by an almost supernatural sense of where their aircraft was in three-dimensional space and how it would respond to their inputs. Elena banked hard left, following the canyon as it curved around a massive outcropping of granite. The G-forces pushed her down into her seat, the flight suit's pressure bladders automatically inflating to keep blood from pooling in her legs. Her vision narrowed slightly at the edges, the early warning sign of G-lock, but she'd trained her body to handle much worse. The F-35's helmet-mounted display showed her everything she needed to know without having to look down at the instruments. Airspeed, altitude, weapon status, threat warnings, all of it projected directly into her field of vision. The aircraft's advanced sensor fusion system combined data from multiple sources into a single coherent picture of the battle space. Right now, that picture showed her alone in a narrow canyon, racing toward a heavily defended enemy convoy, with nothing but skill and technology standing between success and becoming another statistic in Command's failure column. She loved every second of it. Viper 1-1, Command. Be advised, enemy has activated additional air defense radar, designating as target Alpha 7, SA-15 system, elevated position on your intended egress route. Elena's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The new threat appeared as a red icon on her scope, positioned exactly where it would be most problematic for her planned exit from the target area. Someone on the enemy side was thinking tactically, trying to set a trap. Copy, Command. I see it. We'll adjust egress route. Negative, Viper 1-1. Alternate routes put you in range of 2 additional SAM sites. Recommend you maintain planned egress and suppress Alpha 7 with HARM missile. Elena considered this for exactly 3 seconds, her mind running through the mathematics of weapons employment versus fuel consumption versus time on target. A HARM, high-speed anti-radiation missile, would eliminate the SAM threat, but it would also alert every enemy unit in the area that she was coming. Surprise was her greatest advantage, and she'd lose it for the sake of one target. Negative, Command. I'm not wasting a missile on a suppression target. I'll evade Alpha 7 on egress. There was a pause. When the voice came back, it had a different tone, probably a higher-ranking officer who'd taken over the radio. Viper 1-1, Command actual. That's not a suggestion, Captain. The SA-15 has a 95% kill probability in that engagement envelope. You need to eliminate it before it can acquire you. Noted. I'll keep my speed up. Another pause, longer this time. Captain Rodriguez, I'm ordering you to engage that SAM site. Elena's eyes never left the terrain ahead, her hands making micro-adjustments to the stick and throttle as the canyon narrowed even further. Sir, with respect, you gave me tactical autonomy once wheels up. I'm exercising it. The SAM site is a known threat. I can evade it. What I can't evade is 40-plus vehicles dispersing before I can engage if they hear me coming early. The radio was silent for a long moment. She could imagine the scene in the command center, officers arguing about whether to override her decision, someone probably suggesting they abort the mission, others insisting she follow orders. Finally, understood, Viper 1-1, it's your call, but if that SAM gets a lock on you, it won't. Viper 1-1 out. She switched to tactical frequency, cutting off further argument. Command could watch and advise, but they couldn't fly the mission for her. That's what tactical autonomy meant. That's why they'd sent her instead of a whole strike package. The canyon opened up slightly, giving her room to maneuver. Elena pushed the throttle forward, accelerating to 500 knots. The F-35's engine responded instantly, the fighter surging ahead with power that pinned her back in the seat. Speed was life in this environment. The faster she was moving, the less time enemy systems had to track and engage her. Her threat warning receiver remained quiet, which meant she was still flying under the enemy's radar horizon. The canyon walls were masking her from their search radars, and the F-35's low observable characteristics made her almost invisible to electronic detection. Almost. But not quite. The moment she popped up to engage the convoy, every radar system for 50 miles would light up her position. She'd go from invisible to the most targeted aircraft in the theater in the space of a heartbeat. Then it would become a race. Could she identify and destroy her targets before the enemy could bring enough firepower to bear to shoot her down? 15 minutes to target zone, she muttered to herself, checking fuel status. Still good. Well within parameters. The external fuel tanks would be jettisoned once she went into combat mode. The extra weight and drag weren't worth it once the shooting started. The canyon twisted right, then left, then opened into a wider valley. Elena climbed slightly, using the extra altitude to get a better look at the terrain ahead. Her tactical display showed the convoy's position, updated in real time from satellite feeds and other ISR assets in the area. They were exactly where intelligence had predicted, moving at a steady pace through the mountain pass. 47 vehicles confirmed on the feed, spread out over nearly 2 miles of road. The lead elements would be entering the optimal engagement zone in 12 minutes. Perfect. She used the time to review her weapons employment plan one more time. The GBU-39, small-diameter bombs were GPS-guided with a circular error probable of about 5 meters, effectively pinpoint accurate against stationary targets. But these targets wouldn't be stationary. They'd be moving at 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, and the moment she engaged, they'd scatter and accelerate, which meant she needed to hit them fast before they could disperse. The SDBS had a time of flight of about 40 seconds from release to impact. She'd need to lead the targets, account for their movement, drop multiple weapons almost simultaneously to ensure saturation coverage. Her fingers danced over the weapons panel, programming attack sequences into the F-35's computer. The aircraft would help with the calculations, but ultimately it was her judgment that would determine whether the weapons hit their targets or wasted themselves on empty ground. 10 minutes, she said into the silence of the cockpit. The sun was rising now, painting the mountain peaks in shades of gold and orange. Beautiful country for a war. But then, wasn't all country beautiful until people started fighting over it? Elena pushed the philosophical thoughts aside and focused on the mission. Her heart rate was steady at 65 beats per minute, the same as it would be if she were sitting in a briefing room. Some pilots got amped up before combat, adrenaline flooding their system, hands shaking with nervous energy. Not her. For Elena, combat was just another flying exercise, albeit one with higher stakes and less room for error. The calmness wasn't bravado or false confidence. It was the deep certainty that came from 10,000 hours of flight time and an instinctive understanding of how to merge herself with the machine she was flying. The terrain began to change as she approached the target area. The canyons opened up into a broader valley with the mountain pass running through its center. The enemy convoy would be funneled through that pass, unable to disperse significantly due to the terrain on either side. A shooting gallery, if you could get into position without being detected. 5 minutes. Elena dropped even lower, now flying barely 50 feet above the valley floor, the F-35's shadow racing across the rocky ground beneath her. At this altitude, she was invisible to radar, just another piece of terrain to enemy sensors. But it also meant zero room for error. A slight miscalculation, a momentary distraction, and she'd auger into the ground at 500 knots. Her breathing was steady. In through the nose, out through the mouth, hands relaxed on the controls, eyes scanning constantly, instruments, terrain, sky, instruments again. The discipline of thousands of hours of training reduced to automatic responses. 2 minutes. The tactical displays showed the convoy entering the kill zone. Time to climb. Elena pulled back on the stick, simultaneously advancing the throttle to full military power. The F-35 leaped upward, climbing at 40,000 feet per minute, its nose pointed almost straight at the sky. The G-forces slammed her back into the seat, 4, 5, 6 Gs, the pressure suit inflating to crushing tightness around her legs and abdomen. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel, but she kept her eyes locked on the display, watching altitude tick up. 1,000 feet, 2,000, 3,000. At 5,000 feet above the valley floor, she rolled inverted and pulled the stick back again, converting vertical velocity into a high-speed arc that would put her in perfect position above the convoy. Viper 1-1, spiked! Multiple radars, multiple SAM systems activating! The threat warning receiver erupted into a cacophony of tones and warnings. Search radars had found her. Tracking radars were trying to lock on. SAM systems were powering up. The battle had begun. The engagement. Elena rolled the F-35 upright at 7,000 feet, her eyes snapping to the targeting display. Below her, stretched out like toys on a model railroad, was the enemy convoy. 47 vehicles, just as intelligence had reported, moving in a loose formation through the mountain pass. Viper 1-1, weapons hot, engaging. Her fingers flew across the weapons panel, designating targets with speed that came from hundreds of hours in simulators and training flights. The F-35's advanced sensors were already categorizing vehicles, tanks first, then armored personnel carriers, then mobile SAM systems, then support vehicles. The computer was suggesting optimal attack sequences, but Elena was overriding some of the suggestions based on tactical considerations the AI couldn't fully appreciate. Take out the SAMs first. They were the greatest threat to her survival, then the armor, then everything else. Viper 1-1, command. You have multiple SA-15 tracking. Recommend immediate egress. Negative. Engaging. The first GBU-39 dropped away from the internal weapons bay, followed immediately by a second, then a third. Elena was flying at 520 knots, the aircraft's computer calculating complex ballistics, while she kept the fighter in a shallow dive to maintain energy and improve weapons accuracy. On her display, the bombs appeared as small icons falling toward their designated targets. Time to impact, 38 seconds. The convoy continued moving, unaware that death was falling from above. Missile launch, SA-15 bearing 340. Elena's hands moved before conscious thought could register. Hard brake left, nose down, throttle to full afterburner. The F-35 rolled 90 degrees and pulled, the airframe groaning under 8 Gs of force that crushed her into the seat with 1,600 pounds of pressure. Her G-suit inflated painfully tight, forcing blood back up into her brain, keeping her from losing consciousness. The surface-to-air missile streaked past where she'd been 3 seconds earlier, its proximity fuse failing to detonate because she was already 1,000 feet away. The threat warning receiver screamed at her, more missiles launching, more radars tracking. But she couldn't evade yet. The bombs were still in flight, and she needed to designate more targets. Elena rolled inverted again, pulling through to level flight while her eyes tracked the tactical display. The first 3 SDBS were 5 seconds from impact. She selected 3 more targets, all of them mobile SAM systems, and released 3 more weapons. Viper 1-1, multiple missile launches, count 4, no 6 SAMs in flight. She saw them on her display, red threat vectors climbing toward her position from multiple directions. The enemy had been waiting for this, had positioned their air defenses specifically to create an overlapping kill zone that would trap any aircraft that tried to engage the convoy. Time to show them why the F-35 was the most advanced fighter ever built. Elena's hands became a blur of motion. She activated the aircraft's electronic warfare system, flooding the area with jamming signals that would confuse the missile's guidance systems. Simultaneously, she deployed chaff and flares, filling the sky with radar-reflective particles and heat sources that would draw the missiles away from her aircraft. Then she dove. The F-35 plummeted toward the valley floor, accelerating past 600 knots as gravity added to the engine's thrust. The missiles followed, but they were slower, and their guidance systems were being confused by her countermeasures. One missile lost lock and veered off, chasing a chaff cloud. Another went stupid and flew ballistic, falling harmlessly into the mountains. But 4 missiles were still tracking, and they were closing fast. Impact, someone said over the radio. She wasn't sure who. On her display, the first 3 SDBS found their targets. 3 mobile SAM systems vanished in precise explosions, each bomb's 93-pound warhead detonating exactly where it needed to eliminate the vehicle without creating excessive collateral damage. 3 down, 44 to go. Elena pulled out of her dive at 2,000 feet, the G-forces so intense that her vision went completely gray for 2 seconds. When it came back, she was level and accelerating, and the remaining missiles had lost their tracking solution. They detonated behind her in frustrated explosions that lit up the morning sky. Viper 1-1 still in the fight, continuing engagement. She could hear the disbelief in Command's voice when they responded. Copy, Viper 1-1. You are... How did you evade 6 missiles? Training, sir. Stand by, engaging again. The next 3 SDBS impacted while she was talking. 3 more explosions, 3 more vehicles destroyed. She'd eliminated 6 of the enemy's most dangerous systems in the first 30 seconds of combat. But now the convoy was reacting. Vehicles were dispersing, moving off the road and into the rougher terrain on either side. Some were accelerating, trying to get out of the kill zone. Others were stopping to deploy infantry and man-portable air defense systems. Elena climbed back to 5,000 feet, using altitude to give her a better view of the battlefield. Her weapons bay still held 14 SDBS, plus the AGM-154S she was saving for harder targets. Plenty of ammunition for what needed to be done. She designated 6 targets simultaneously, a mix of tanks and APCS, and released 6 weapons in a ripple sequence. The bombs dropped away, their GPS guidance already steering them toward their targets. Viper 1-1, Command. Outstanding work. Recommend you begin egress. You've neutralized their air defense. That's a mission success. Elena's eyes tracked across the tactical display, counting vehicles. 41 enemy units remained, now scattered across 3 square miles of terrain. The original mission objective was to stop the convoy. Stop didn't mean inconvenience. Stop meant destroy. Negative, Command. I still have targets and I still have weapons. Continuing engagement. Captain, you're Winchester on countermeasures and you've been in the target area for 3 minutes. Enemy QRF will be launching fighters within. Then I better work faster. Viper 1-1 out. She banked hard right, positioning for another attack run. The 6 SDBS she'd just released were tracking toward their targets, flight time 20 seconds. She used that time to assess the battlefield with a tactical eye that had been trained by the best military minds in America. The enemy was dispersing, but not randomly. They were moving to positions that would give them mutual support, creating overlapping fields of fire that would make additional air attacks more difficult. Someone down there was thinking tactically, probably a commander with real combat experience. Good. That made it more interesting. Elena selected her next 6 targets, prioritizing the vehicles that were moving toward defensive positions. Deny them the terrain they wanted, keep them reacting rather than planning, maintain the initiative through unrelenting aggression. 6 more SDBS away. She was down to 8 weapons in the internal bay now, plus the external stores. Ordnance was becoming a limiting factor, which meant she needed to make every shot count. The previous 6 weapons impacted, 6 more vehicles destroyed in precise explosions, 12 vehicles eliminated in the first 90 seconds of actual engagement. She was ahead of schedule. Viper 1-1, missile launch, SA-22 system bearing 090. A new threat, more dangerous than the SA-15s, the SA-22. Greyhound was a state-of-the-art system with advanced tracking and a missile capable of engaging targets at high speed and low altitude. Getting hit by one would be catastrophic. Elena didn't hesitate. She selected one of her AGM-154 joint standoff weapons, designated the SA-22's position, and released. The JASM dropped away and ignited its engine, accelerating to Mach 0.8 as it began a terrain-following approach to the target. The SA-22 would never see it coming. But the SA-22's missiles were already in flight, 2 of them, tracking her position with worrying accuracy. Elena rolled inverted and pulled, converting her altitude into airspeed while simultaneously turning to put the missiles on her beam. The geometry of aerial combat. Make the missile work harder, maneuver in 3 dimensions, deny it an easy intercept solution. The F-35 pulled through a high G barrel roll that would have torn the wings off lesser aircraft. Elena's vision grayed again, but she fought through it, keeping her eyes on the threat display. The missiles were turning with her, but they were burning fuel at an unsustainable rate to maintain their pursuit. One lost energy and fell away. The other kept coming. "Come on," Elena muttered, watching its icon creep closer on the display. "Come on." She waited until the missile was 2 seconds from impact, then chopped the throttle to idle and deployed the speed brakes. The F-35 decelerated like it had hit a wall, shedding 200 knots of airspeed in less than 3 seconds. The missile, unable to adjust its intercept course fast enough, overshot and detonated behind her. "Too slow," she said to the empty cockpit, advancing the throttle back to full power. Her JASM found its target. The SA-22 vanished in an explosion that lit up her display like a small sun. That was the last of their advanced air defense systems. Everything else was short-range manpads, dangerous but easier to evade. Elena checked her fuel. 30% remaining. She'd need to save 20% for egress, which gave her 10% for continued combat operations. Call it 5 more minutes in the target area. 5 minutes to destroy 29 vehicles. She could work with that. The Fury. Elena rolled into a hard right bank, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The remaining enemy vehicles had fully dispersed now, scattered across the valley in ones and twos, making them harder to target efficiently. Some had taken cover behind rock formations, others were moving at high speed toward defensive positions, but dispersal was a double-edged sword. Yes, it made them harder to hit with area weapons, but it also meant they couldn't support each other effectively, and it meant Elena could engage them one by one without worrying about overlapping fire from multiple positions. Viper 1-1, command. Satellite shows enemy fighters launching from airbase November. 4 aircraft. Estimated time to your position, 12 minutes. Elena did the math instantly. 12 minutes gave her 7 minutes to finish the job and 5 minutes to egress. Tight, but doable. Copy. Continuing engagement. She selected 4 targets clustered near a rocky outcrop. Tanks trying to use the terrain for protection. 4 SDBS away, and she was Winchester on internal weapons. The external pylons still carried 2 AGM-154S and a full load of air-to-air missiles, but using the JASSMS for individual vehicles would be wasteful. Time to get creative. The 4 SDBS impacted with their characteristic precision. 4 tanks destroyed, their ammunition cooking off in secondary explosions that sent turrets tumbling through the air like toys. 16 vehicles remained. Elena armed the external JASSM and designated a cluster of vehicles near what looked like a command post, multiple antennas, more personnel activity than other locations. The JASSM dropped away and began its attack run. While it was in flight, Elena rolled inverted and dove toward a group of 3 APCS that were racing across open ground. She was out of smart weapons, but the F-35 carried a 25mm GAU-22 cannon with 182 rounds of ammunition. Time to do this the old-fashioned way. The aircraft's advanced targeting system put a firing reticle on her helmet display, showing exactly where her cannon shells would impact, based on her speed, altitude, and the target's movement. Elena adjusted her dive angle slightly, waited for the perfect moment, and squeezed the trigger. The GAU-22 roared to life, sending 25mm high-explosive incendiary rounds downrange at 3,300 rounds per minute. The burst lasted 2 seconds and put 38 rounds into and around the first APC. The vehicle came apart like it was made of paper, ammunition, and fuel exploding in a fireball that engulfed the crew before they could escape. Elena walked the cannon fire across to the second APC. Another burst, another explosion. The third APC tried to evade, the driver swerving hard right, but Elena led the target perfectly, and her next burst caught it in the engine compartment. The vehicle slewed to a stop, smoke pouring from its hood. 13 remaining, she said, pulling out of the dive at 3,000 feet. The JASSM found the command post and obliterated it along with 2 nearby vehicles. 10 remaining. Viper 1-1, command. Enemy fighters now 8 minutes out. Strongly recommend egress. Copy. 8 minutes is plenty of time. She wasn't being cocky. The mathematics were straightforward. 10 targets, 100 rounds of cannon ammunition remaining, 5 minutes of fuel for combat operations. She could destroy 2 targets per minute with cannon fire, leaving her 3 minutes to egress. The only variable was whether the remaining enemy vehicles would cooperate by staying where she could engage them. Elena selected her last JASSM and designated 2 vehicles that had taken cover behind a rock formation. The weapon deployed and began its attack. While it was in flight, she was already lining up another gun run. A truck towing what looked like a mobile radar system was trying to reach the relative safety of a narrow canyon. Elena rolled inverted, pulled through to a steep dive, and put the target in her piping. The cannon spoke again, 20 rounds, and the truck dissolved into flames. 7 remaining. The JASSM impacted, taking out both vehicles behind the rock formation. 5 remaining. Viper 1-1, 6 minutes to enemy fighters. Captain, you need to leave now. Elena checked her fuel. 22% remaining. Still comfortable. Acknowledged. Finishing the job first. She'd spotted 3 vehicles clustered near what looked like a dried riverbed, probably thinking the depression would provide protection from air attack. She rolled into position and dove, the GAU-22 already spooling up. 3 quick bursts, 3 explosions. The riverbed became a kill zone. 2 vehicles remaining. And then she lost them. Elena pulled up to 5,000 feet and scanned the tactical display. The last 2 vehicles had disappeared into a canyon system where her sensors couldn't track them effectively. The narrow walls were creating radar shadows, and the vehicles were small enough that they could hide under rock overhangs. She circled the area, eyes scanning both the display and the actual terrain below. Somewhere down there, 2 enemy vehicles were trying to survive. All they had to do was hide for another 5 minutes, and Elena would be forced to leave to avoid the enemy fighters. Viper 1-1, command. 4 minutes to enemy fighters. You need to egress immediately. Stand by. She couldn't leave with targets still active. The mission was to destroy the convoy, not most of the convoy. Those last 2 vehicles could be carrying the secret weapon systems that intelligence was so worried about, could be carrying high-value personnel, could be carrying something that would make all of this meaningless if they escaped. Elena made a decision that would have made her instructors either applaud or have heart attacks. She wasn't sure which. She rolled the F-35 toward the canyon and dove. Viper 1-1, what are you doing? Going hunting, command. The canyon was barely wide enough for her wings, maybe 300 feet across at its widest point. Elena dropped into it at 300 knots, threading the needle with precision that bordered on supernatural. The walls flashed past her wingtips, close enough that she could see individual cracks in the rock. Her sensors were useless in here. Too much clutter, too many reflections. She was flying on visual reference alone, eyes scanning for any sign of the vehicles. There. A flash of movement, maybe 200 meters ahead. One of the vehicles, trying to hide behind a rock pile. Elena armed the gun and adjusted her angle slightly. The canyon was too narrow for her to maneuver much, so she'd only get 1 pass. Had to make it count. She squeezed the trigger. 30 rounds walked across the rock pile and found the vehicle hiding behind it. The APC exploded, blocking the canyon with burning wreckage, 1 remaining. Viper 1-1, 3 minutes to enemy fighters. You have to leave. Elena pulled up hard, clawing for altitude to get clear of the canyon walls. Where was the last vehicle? It had to be nearby, probably deeper in the canyon system, and then she saw it, emerging from a side canyon and making a run for open ground. A command vehicle, probably carrying officers and sensitive equipment. The vehicle everyone else had died protecting. Elena rolled inverted and pulled, converting altitude into airspeed while positioning for a final gun run. The targeting reticle settled over the fleeing vehicle. She had maybe 40 rounds of ammunition left, enough for 1 burst. Her finger found the trigger. The GAU-22 fired for the last time, sending the remaining ammunition downrange in a concentrated stream of destruction. The rounds impacted around and on the command vehicle, shredding tires and armor and everything in between. The vehicle rolled twice and came to rest upside down, smoke pouring from its shattered hulls. Splash 44 vehicles, Elena said calmly. Winchester on all weapons, beginning egress. The silence from command lasted several seconds. Viper 1-1. That was... Did you just say 44 vehicles? Affirmative. Complete destruction of enemy convoy. Egressing now. Elena rolled the F-35 onto an egress heading advancing the throttle to full military power. The aircraft accelerated smoothly, climbing back to altitude where she could use speed and energy to her advantage. Enemy fighters 2 minutes out, bearing 180. They're looking for you, Captain. Let them look. I'm already gone. She checked her fuel. 18%, enough to get home, barely. The empty external pylons were creating more drag than she'd like, but jettisoning them would leave evidence of her route, and operational security suggested keeping them attached. Behind her, the valley was filled with smoke from 44 burning vehicles. Intelligence would send ground teams later to assess the damage and collect whatever intelligence could be salvaged. For now, all that mattered was that the convoy would never reach its destination. Mission accomplished. Viper 1-1, command. Time in target area, 17 minutes, 42 seconds. That's incredible. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Just doing my job, command. Captain, that wasn't just doing your job. I don't even have words for what that was. The enemy fighters appeared on her radar, still searching for her. But she was already 20 miles away and climbing, the F-35's low observable characteristics making her effectively invisible to their sensors. They'd patrol the area for a while, find nothing but wreckage, and eventually return to base to report that the convoy had been destroyed by an unknown American aircraft. Unknown to them, maybe, but command knew exactly who had done it. As Elena turned toward home, she heard Hayden's voice come over the radio, direct and unfiltered by tactical controllers. Captain Rodriguez, Colonel Hayden, I watched the entire engagement from the command center. I've been flying military aircraft for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like what you just did. 44 vehicles in under 18 minutes, alone, against integrated air defense that had already defeated multiple attack packages. That's going to be studied at every military academy for the next 50 years. Thank you, sir. But if it's all the same to you, I'd like to keep it classified. Don't want to give our enemies any more reason to improve their air defense systems. Hayden laughed, the sound carrying relief and amazement in equal measure. That's probably wise, Captain. Probably wise. Welcome home. We'll have a full debrief waiting and probably some very senior people who want to shake your hand. Roger that, sir. Viper 1-1, inbound. The flight home was peaceful, almost meditative after the violence of the past 20 minutes. Elena ran through post-combat checks, making sure all systems were functioning normally, cataloging any battle damage. There was none. She'd avoided being hit entirely, and calculating exact fuel consumption for her after-action report. The sun was fully up now, turning the desert landscape golden. Beautiful country. And somewhere below, on roads and in valleys, people were going about their lives, completely unaware that a major enemy offensive had just been stopped by a single pilot in a single aircraft. That was fine with Elena. She didn't need recognition or fame. She just needed to do the job, do it better than anyone else, and prove that when command said something was impossible, they just meant no one else had figured out how to do it yet. The aftermath. The F-35 touched down with its characteristic smooth grace, the main gear chirping slightly as rubber met concrete. Elena let the aircraft roll out, using minimal braking to conserve the worn pads. The tower had already cleared the runway. Apparently, word of her mission had spread, and everyone wanted to see the pilot who'd just rewritten the tactical manual on solo air operations. As she taxied toward her hardstand, Elena could see what looked like the entire squadron lining the taxiway. Pilots, ground crew, support personnel, all of them standing at attention. It was unusual, unsettling even. She wasn't comfortable with this kind of attention. She parked the F-35 in its designated spot and went through the shutdown procedure with her usual methodical precision. Systems off one by one, displays going dark, the aircraft settling into silence after the controlled fury of combat operations. Master Sergeant Torres was already climbing the ladder before her canopy was fully open. Captain, Holy hell, Captain, did you really destroy 44 vehicles? Elena unbuckled her harness and started extracting herself from the cockpit. 44 confirmed. Might have been a couple more that didn't make it into the official count. Torres's weathered face split into a grin. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard, and I've been doing this job for 23 years. He helped her down the ladder, his hands shaking slightly with excitement or adrenaline. The bird performed perfectly? Like a dream, Sergeant. Not a single malfunction. You and your crew did outstanding work. We just prep her, ma'am. You're the one who flies her into situations that would make test pilots quit. Colonel Hayden was waiting at the base of the ladder, along with Lieutenant Chen, Captain Webb, Lieutenant Mitchell, and Sergeant Torres. Behind them, the crowd of personnel maintained their formation, waiting. Hayden stepped forward, his expression showing something Elena had never seen on his face before. Genuine awe. Captain Rodriguez, what you did today. Command says no one could beat that enemy. You proved them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Elena set her helmet down on a nearby equipment cart. Sir, with respect, Command was wrong. Someone could beat that enemy. It just required the right approach and the right aircraft. And the right pilot, Webb added, stepping forward. Elena, I take back every word of caution I said before you launched. What you did out there was beyond anything I've seen in 15 years of combat operations. That gun run in the canyon, that was pilot skill at a level most of us can't even comprehend. Chen nodded enthusiastically. The command center recorded everything. They're already pulling the footage to analyze your tactics. The way you evaded those SAMs, the weapons employment sequences, the target prioritization, it's going to revolutionize how we think about solo strike operations. Mitchell, usually quiet, spoke up. Ma'am, I counted 6 separate instances where you should have been shot down. The missile evasion alone. How did you know when to break? The timing was perfect every time. Elena considered the question. Training, mostly, and situational awareness. You learn to read the battlefield, to understand what the enemy is trying to do before they do it. The missiles weren't random. They were following tactical doctrine. Once you understand the doctrine, you can predict the attack patterns. That's not training, Webb said flatly. That's instinct. That's a level of spatial awareness that can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. Hayden held up a hand. We can discuss tactical theory later. Right now, Captain Rodriguez needs to get to the command center for debrief. There are some very senior people waiting to speak with her. He lowered his voice slightly, including some people whose names I don't even know. This mission has attracted attention from the highest levels. Elena felt a slight unease. High-level attention usually meant politics, and politics meant people trying to use her mission for purposes that had nothing to do with military effectiveness. Sir, I'd rather keep this quiet. Standard after-action report, nothing more. Hayden's expression was sympathetic but firm. I'm afraid that ship has sailed, Captain. You destroyed an enemy force that had defeated 3 previous attack attempts. You did it alone, and you did it without taking any damage. That's not something that stays quiet. The Secretary of Defense was watching the live feed. So was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Wonderful, Elena muttered. Come on, Hayden said, gesturing toward a waiting vehicle. Let's get this over with. The sooner you do the official debrief, the sooner everyone will leave you alone. The ride to the command center was short, but felt longer due to the weight of what was coming. Elena had never been comfortable with attention or accolades. She joined the military to fly, to serve, to do something meaningful with the skills she'd developed. The recognition was irrelevant. The command center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Officers and analysts crowded around displays showing satellite imagery and radar tracks from her mission. Elena could see the entire engagement played out on the screens. Her approach through the canyons, the pop-up to engagement altitude, the destruction of the convoy, even the final gun run in the narrow canyon. A senior officer she didn't recognize, 3 stars on his collar, approached immediately. Captain Rodriguez, General Matthews, Air Combat Command. That was the most impressive display of airmanship and combat effectiveness I've seen in my career, and I've been doing this job for 32 years. Elena came to attention. Thank you, sir. Walk me through it, Matthews said, gesturing to the main display. Start with your ingress. How did you know you could fly through those canyons at that speed? I studied the terrain extensively before the mission, sir. Memorized every turn, every narrowing, every potential hazard. Then, I calculated the minimum safe speed needed to maintain maneuverability while maximizing time compression against enemy reaction times. And the initial engagement. You released 3 weapons before the enemy even knew you were there. How did you prioritize targets that quickly? Elena pointed to the display. The SA-15 systems were the greatest threat. Eliminate them first. Then the armor, because tanks can anchor a defensive position and complicate follow-up attacks. Then, command and control vehicles, because disrupting their coordination prevents effective response. Matthews nodded slowly. Textbook target prioritization. But executing it under fire, against a prepared enemy, while evading multiple SAMs, that's where theory becomes legend. Another officer stepped forward, this one wearing Air Force intelligence insignia. Captain, we've been analyzing the enemy's response patterns. They employed tactics specifically designed to counter solo aircraft attacks, multiple overlapping SAM zones, dispersal protocols, fighters on standby. They were ready for someone like you. How did you overcome their preparation? Speed and aggression, sir. They prepared for a cautious approach, standoff weapons, high-altitude bombing, evasion at first sign of heavy resistance. I did the opposite. Close range, immediate engagement, continuous pressure. I didn't give them time to react effectively. You also did something none of our doctrine recommends, the intelligence officer said, pulling up video of her canyon gun run. You flew into a confined space where you had minimal maneuverability, chasing targets that could have easily ambushed you. That's listed in our tactical manuals as inadvisable under all circumstances. Elena allowed herself a slight smile. That's why it worked, sir. They didn't expect it because it's inadvisable. Sometimes the best tactic is the one your enemy thinks you'd never attempt. General Matthews laughed. Unconventional thinking. I like it, though I imagine your instructors had heart attacks when they saw that footage. Probably, sir. The debrief continued for 2 hours. They wanted every detail: fuel consumption rates, weapons employment sequences, threat reactions, her decision-making process at each critical juncture. Elena provided technical answers, focusing on the mechanics of the mission rather than the drama of it. Finally, Matthews called a halt. All right, Captain, I think we've squeezed every drop of tactical knowledge out of your brain for today. Outstanding work, truly outstanding. You've given us a blueprint for how to conduct solo strike operations against heavily defended targets. That's going to save lives down the road. Thank you, sir. Happy to contribute. There's one more thing, Matthews said, his tone shifting to something more formal. Given the success of this mission and your exceptional performance, Air Combat Command is recommending you for immediate promotion to Major and reassignment to our Advanced Tactics Development Program. We need people who can think outside conventional paradigms, and you've proven you can do exactly that. Elena felt a sudden wariness. Advanced Tactics Development meant leaving flight status, becoming an instructor or theorist rather than an operational pilot. It meant a desk instead of a cockpit. Sir, with respect, I'd prefer to remain in my current position. I'm most effective when I'm flying missions, not developing them. Matthews had clearly expected this response. I understand your preference, Captain, but the military needs your skills in multiple capacities. Your tactical innovations can benefit hundreds of pilots if you're teaching them. Your insights can save thousands of lives if they're incorporated into our doctrine. Sir, that said, Matthews continued, I'm not going to force the issue. You've earned the right to choose your path. Think about it. Talk to Colonel Hayden. We'll revisit this discussion in a month. Thank you, sir. Matthews extended his hand. Thank you, Captain Rodriguez. You proved today that one exceptional pilot in the right aircraft can accomplish what entire squadrons couldn't. That's a lesson we needed to learn, and you taught it to us in the most definitive way possible. Elena shook his hand, then followed Hayden out of the command center. The colonel was quiet until they were back outside, away from the crowd of officers and analysts. He's right, you know, Hayden said finally, about your potential impact on tactics and doctrine. What you did today will be studied for decades. You could shape the future of air combat if you wanted to. I don't want to shape the future, sir. I just want to fly. Hayden smiled. I know. That's what makes you special. You're not doing this for glory or recognition. You're doing it because you love flying and you're good at it. That purity of purpose is rare. They walked in silence for a moment, then Hayden continued. But consider what Matthews said. Not because of career advancement or prestige, but because you could genuinely help other pilots survive. Everything you know, every instinct you've developed, every tactic you've innovated, that knowledge dies with you if you don't pass it on. Elena didn't respond immediately. She'd never thought of herself as a teacher. But Hayden had a point. If her skills and knowledge could help other pilots come home alive, didn't she have an obligation to share them? I'll think about it, sir. That's all I ask. Back at the squadron area, her fellow pilots had organized an impromptu celebration. Nothing formal, just people gathering around to hear the story firsthand and congratulate her on the mission success. Elena endured it with good grace, answering questions and accepting compliments, but she was relieved when Torres finally rescued her with the excuse that she needed to complete post-flight maintenance reports. Thanks, Sergeant, she said once they were alone by the aircraft. Figured you could use an escape, Torres said, running his hand along the F-35's fuselage. Not a scratch on her. Not one damn scratch after flying through hell and back. That's phenomenal flying, Captain. Good maintenance helps, Elena said. If this bird hadn't performed perfectly, none of it would have been possible. Torres nodded, accepting the compliment. Then, quieter. What you did today, Captain. That's the kind of thing people will be talking about 50 years from now. The pilot who destroyed an entire enemy convoy single-handedly. The mission everyone said was impossible that you made look routine. You're going to be famous whether you want to be or not. Elena sighed. I really don't want to be. I know, but sometimes we don't get to choose. You did something exceptional. Own it. Because a lot of people are going to be inspired by what you did, and that inspiration might save their lives someday. He was right, of course, just like Hayden was right about the teaching. Just like Matthews was right about the tactical development. They were all right, and Elena knew it, even if she didn't particularly like it. Sergeant, if I ask you a question, will you give me a straight answer? Always have, ma'am. Do you think what I did today was reckless? That canyon gun run, the close-range engagement, all of it. Was it reckless, or was it calculated risk? Torres considered the question carefully. Ma'am, I've been supporting pilots for over 2 decades. I've seen reckless and I've seen calculated. Reckless is when you take unnecessary chances for ego or adrenaline. Calculated is when you take necessary chances because they're the only way to accomplish the mission. Everything you did today was calculated. Dangerous, yes, but calculated. Thank you, Sergeant. I needed to hear that. Anytime, Captain. Now go get some rest. You've earned it. Elena walked back to her quarters alone, the evening air cool against her face. The base was settling into its nighttime routine, shifts changing, aircraft being secured, the constant low hum of military operations continuing, whether there was a war on or not. Her room was sparse, like all pilot quarters. Bunk, locker, small desk. Elena sat on the edge of the bunk and allowed herself, for the first time since landing, to actually process what had happened. 44 vehicles destroyed, 17 minutes and 42 seconds of continuous combat, 6 surface-to-air missiles evaded, 0 damage to her aircraft, mission success when everyone said success was impossible. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it just felt like Tuesday. That was the thing about being exceptional at something. Eventually, exceptional performance became your baseline. What amazed everyone else was just another day at work for you. Her phone buzzed. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. Outstanding work today, Captain. Signed, A Grateful Nation. She deleted it without responding. There would be more messages like that, more attention, more pressure to be a symbol rather than just a pilot. She'd deal with it the same way she dealt with everything else. Focus on the job, ignore the noise, keep flying. Elena lay back on the bunk and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow there would be more debriefs, more questions, probably media requests that would be denied for operational security reasons. The week after that, decisions about her future role in the Air Force. But tonight, for just a few hours, she could be Captain Elena Rodriguez, fighter pilot, Someone who'd proven that when command said no one could beat the enemy, they just meant no one had tried hard enough yet. She closed her eyes and smiled slightly. 44 vehicles in 18 minutes. Not bad for a day's work. Not bad at all. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories every day.